On the morning of December 6, 1917, the bustling port city of Halifax in Nova Scotia was forever changed by one of the largest man-made explosions in history. In fact, at the time, it was the largest, only 7 times smaller than the nuclear bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima during World War II almost 30 years later. The Halifax explosion is so famous, it's referenced in the new Oppenheimer movie when they're discussing how to measure such big explosions. This catastrophic event resulted from the collision of 2 ships, the Mont Blanc and the Imo, in the Halifax harbor. The ensuing explosion and its aftermath left an indelible mark on the city and its residents. It is a tale of incredible loss, sacrifice, and international solidarity. In today's video, we'll delve into the details of how the Halifax explosion occurred, the scale of the disaster, the heroic actions of individuals like Vince Coleman, and other intriguing facts surrounding the devastating incident. Back in 1917, Halifax was a bustling wartime port city, serving a crucial hub for the transportation of troops, supplies, and munitions during World War I. With its deep ice-free harbor, the sea was a beehive of activity, hosting Canadian, British Empire, and American vessels, in addition to the Royal Canadian Navy. The bustling port and naval presence brought prosperity to Halifax, with millions of tons of supplies passing through the city, including wheat, lumber, coal, food, munitions, and armaments. The stage was set for disaster when 2 ships, the Mont Blanc and the Imo, found themselves on a collision course in the narrowest section of the Halifax harbor, known as the Narrows. The Mont Blanc, a French munitions ship, was filled with highly explosive materials, including benzol, picric acid, TNT, and gun cotton, destined for the battlefields of World War I. The Imo, on the other hand, was a Norwegian vessel, en route to New York to pick up relief supplies for war-torn Belgium. The collision between these 2 ships was the catalyst for the disaster. The Imo was departing from the harbor and, in an unusual turn of events, found itself on the wrong side of the Narrows. The Mont Blanc was inbound and on the Dartmouth side of the Narrows when the collision occurred. Miscommunications and failed maneuvers between the 2 ships led to a collision and sparked a series of tragic events. Following the collision, the Mont Blanc caught fire, igniting the volatile materials in the cargo hold. For almost 20 minutes, the ship burned, sending a plume of black smoke into the sky. The spectacle drew the attention of people on shore, and despite the imminent danger, many gathered to watch the fire. In the harbor, firefighters and sailors from other ships headed toward the Mont Blanc, hoping to extinguish the fire. While at the same time, Francis Mackey, the captain of the Mont Blanc, and his crew fled in lifeboats, rowing frantically to the Dartmouth shore, fearing the imminent explosion. The explosion of the Mont Blanc occurred at precisely 9:04 a.m. and unleashed a shockwave in all directions, followed by a devastating tsunami that washed over the shores of Halifax and Dartmouth. The impact was catastrophic, with more than 2.5 square kilometers of Richmond, a working-class neighborhood in Halifax, entirely leveled. The destruction resulted from the blast, the tsunami, and the structure fires that erupted when buildings collapsed, trapping people and sparking lanterns, stoves, and furnaces. Homes, offices, churches, factories, vessels, the railway station, and the freight yards were obliterated. The explosion shattered windows in Truro, a city 100 kilometers away, and the boom of the explosion was even heard in Prince Edward Island. Incredibly, even a fishing boat off the coast of Massachusetts claimed to have heard the explosion rumbling across the ocean. Author Laura MacDonald described the sheer ferocity of the explosion in her book, Curse of the Narrows. The air blast initially traveled through narrow streets, toppling buildings, crashing through windows, doors, walls, and chimneys at an astonishing speed. The blast inflicted horrific injuries, from exploded lungs and eardrums to severe internal trauma. The shockwave shattered internal organs, picked up people and thrashed them against trees, walls, and lampposts, killing them with brutal force. Roofs and ceilings collapsed, trapping families under timber, beams, and furniture. In houses that withstood the blast, windows stretched inwards until the glass shattered, sending out a shower of arrow-shaped slivers that cut through curtains, wallpapers, and walls. The explosion resulted in a significant loss of life and injuries. Almost 1,600 people died instantly, including hundreds of children. Roughly 400 more perished from their injuries in the days that followed. Morgue records from 1918 documented 1,631 known dead or missing, with approximately a third of them under the age of 15. By 2004, the number of fatality was revised to 1,946. 9,000 more people were wounded, with hundreds left blinded or partially blinded by flying glass. Over 1,500 buildings were destroyed and 12,000 sustained damage. The explosion left 25,000 people homeless or without adequate shelter, exacerbating the crisis as a winter blizzard struck Halifax the following day. The estimated property damage was valued at approximately $35 million, or roughly $693 million in today's currency. The tragedy, of course, shook the world as it made headlines across the world. It took years for the people of Halifax to rebuild and cope with the accident. Thankfully, the international community came together and support came flooding in from all parts of the world. Today, there are many monuments and museums commemorating the event, and one in particular stands out. There is still to this day a monument with the anchor from the Mont Blanc ship that was blown 5.5 kilometers away from the initial blast and landed where it still sits today. But probably the most incredible fact stemming from this remarkable story is that of the heroic sacrifice by Vincent Coleman. Back on that fateful day in 1917, Vincent was a railway dispatcher who was responsible for controlling the busy rail traffic in and out of the Halifax Peninsula. In the face of the impending disaster, he realized that a train with hundreds of passengers was en route and took a selfless and courageous step by staying at the post to send a warning up the line, ultimately saving countless lives. The message he sent was, "Hold up the train, ammunition ship afire in harbor, making for train 6, and will explode. Guess this will be my last message. Goodbye, boys." This note encapsulates the gravity of the situation and the heroism he displayed. Vincent Coleman paid the ultimate price for his actions, sacrificing his life to protect over 300 people who almost certainly would have died if it weren't for him. And with that, we conclude today's video. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, please consider subscribing, and hopefully we will see you in the next one.